thinking back to your 20s, I know you worked at Google, and that had to be an incredible experience. Looking back, what advice would you give yourself?
It's easy to get restless, even in these perfect on paper jobs. I worked at a startup for 2 years prior to Google, and then I was at Google for 5.5. I am so glad that I pivoted internally when I was at Google, because there was a point 2.5 years in where I was hitting a ceiling. I was actually managing people and not very happy about it. I loved the coaching piece, but it made me so nervous having to deal with personnel stuff or giving tough feedback. I think I'm honestly was kind of too sensitive for a role like that. As much as I want to say, oh, I could overcome it, it just didn't quite fit my personality. I would much rather be working more independently, more creatively. And I did have a coach give me advice that have you really made the most of your time there? And so thank goodness I ran into a friend in the parking lot. She said, "How are you doing?" I told her, "Not great. I'm thinking of leaving." She said, "Well, we just opened up this team, this career development team, and there's one open role. Maybe you should apply for it." Because I had been doing side projects within Google and outside of Google related to coaching and careers and writing, I was able to apply and get that role and stay at the company 2.5 more years and launch this program that I'm still so incredibly proud of today called Career Guru. That's a drop-in coaching program that they still have in place. And so one thing I would say is don't leave too soon. I talk in Pivot about borrowing two financial terms: unrealized gains and diminishing returns. Unrealized gains is you haven't stayed long enough. You haven't done at least one flagship product, program, accomplishment, something that you can look back and say, during that window of time, here's this thing I did and I'm so proud of it. And here are the results. And you and I, Deborah, before I hit record, we were even talking about a journalist that we like, Faith Sally, and you knew one piece she had done on Vocal Fry. And you
Vocal
knew, and
fry.
here's this one. Exactly. So staying long enough to see something through, to get some kind of results. And then on the flip side of that, diminishing returns, don't stay so long that you're completely stagnant and miserable and that you're trying to make something work. All the while, nothing you're trying is working. There's no sense of traction or momentum, flow. You're actively getting drained, because what I found out only the hard way, especially in my 20s, was I just kept burning out. And whether it was from having a full-time job and a side hustle, that was my blog, Life After College, what became the book, or just the fast pace of working within a big company like Google, I just kept hitting burnout, and I would just burn out, crash, recover, and not really know how to get out of that cycle until I did end up leaving the company and kind of being able to set my own hours on my own. And so I would just say that if you stay too long in something that isn't working, your body will start to react and reject the situation and trying to speak louder and louder of like, hey, this isn't working. You got to pay attention to me.
I remember staying at my last local station probably a little longer than I should have, but then again, should have, like, well, I can't really look back and say, well, this would have happened or that would have happened. I mean, I was there for the time I was there. I had kind of plateaued, wasn't happy. And then, when you're not happy about work and then you keep going to work, well, guess what? It's that cycle of unhappy, unhappy. And now I'm just spreading unhappiness all over the place. And that's not my being. So I'm so with you on that. Don't stay longer than you need to, because time is money. And even if you're in your 20s and you think, oh, I've got all this time, which you do, you have a lot of time, your time is worth it. Your time is valuable.
Sometimes people feel a lot of pressure that if their job isn't perfect or they're not getting promoted fast enough, they start freaking out, especially early in career. Especially in my 20s, I often felt kind of paranoid of, are things moving fast enough? Interestingly, it was some of those side projects that I mentioned that ended up giving me these incredible opportunities down the road, and they don't have to be your full-time job. So for example, when I started at Google, I wanted to create a book club amongst the training team. And I asked for budget and I got approval that we could all buy the same business book once a month and sometimes even invite the author to meet with us. I had no plans of being like Google's chief book club officer or anything like that. But years later, when the Authors at Google program was at risk of dissolving altogether because it was completely volunteer-based, the powers that be thought to themselves, they go, who could we bring in to be an interim lead for this area of the business? Oh, Jenny loves books. And they just knew back from those book club days that I love books and maybe I could step in and help lead this team and turn the corner. And we did. And yet it was never my full-time role. I was never on paper on what you would see on LinkedIn. I was still a career development program manager, but that was another kind of project-based purpose or a part-time project, even within the role, that was so fulfilling because as I was leading authors at Google, I was bringing in all of these interesting authors to come speak. They were delighted to get to come to Google and give a talk. And those relationships, I still have several of them are close friends to this day, 12 years later.